Okay, it is 7:16 p.m. on Monday, November 24th, and I am calling to order this school board work session. As we call this meeting to order, the school board would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge that we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Our mission statement: as a community, we create supportive learning environments where all students thrive. Ms. Richardson, will you please call the roll?
Miss Carol Hubbard,
Here.
Mr. Doran,
Here.
Miss Julian,
Here.
Miss Hewitt,
Here.
Mrs. Hull,
Here.
Miss Maple,
Here.
Mr. Burgess.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Today we have policy work on our agenda, Article 5 specifically. But before we jump into that, I did want to let the board know that in light of the discussion around the Two Rivers charter application, we are looking at scheduling or repurposing a work session next week so that we can have some more discussion and provide some direction for administration around where we want to go with that discussion. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Dr. Minert or myself. And with that, I will turn this over to Dr. Minert and Ms. Dillard for the Article 5 policy work. Oh, sorry. One more quick procedural note. I am planning to adjourn us promptly at 8:30, so we're just going to get through as much of this as we can. We're not looking to complete the whole 48 pages tonight. We're going to go until 8:30, and then we're out. And we will resume the policy work at a subsequent work session. Ms. Dillard.
Thank you.
President Burgess. I will jump right in. So Article 5 is primarily aligned with our Chapter 10. It's regarding students. This is about the first half of the packet, maybe a little bit less actually than the packet that's going to be all of Article 5. I'm going to go through each policy, so we won't be jumping around. I'll just start with a summary of kind of where the policy came from, whether it's something that we have in existence in our current policy, or if it's brand new to our district, if there's been any major procedural changes that are presented by the edits that we've made, and then go with questions and comments, and we'll just move through that way. So we'll start with the first one, which is Board Policy 5000, Concepts and Roles. We do have each of the articles in the ASB model manual has this introductory policy. So this is new to our district. We do not have a policy that aligns with this policy. We took the ASB language, but we did edit it a bit to fit our district.
Mr. Doran.
Thank you. And again, thanks for all the administrative work and transferring things over and capturing our ideas and stuff. In the third paragraph, I'm going to suggest a wording change that I think better reflects what our educators do. Instead of saying students are expected to accept personal responsibility, that they're encouraged and supported in accepting personal responsibility. Because I think we recognize that students, it's a spectrum and such, but it also, I think our teachers have worked hard not to get caught in the conundrum of, well, I taught it, it's up to them. If they didn't get it, they didn't, it's on them. It's not, and our teachers, I think, really demonstrate they take a responsibility in that, in really supporting students to get to that point of their personal responsibility, et cetera. So I just think it's a better reflection of our practice.
Thank you, Mr. Doran. I am not seeing any disagreement from the board. A lot of head nods there, so appreciate that. Anything else from the board before we move to the next one? Seeing none.
All right, the next one is 5021 non-custodial parents. Now this is also a new policy to our district. Just want to highlight, because we've had the discussion before about the global change to parent guardian, but the term guardian would not be appropriate in this context. It speaks to parents that do not have custody or guardianship, but still have educational rights. Most parents are going to have educational rights, even if they don't have custody. Termination of parental rights is pretty rare. It happens, and the school district would be alerted, but it's pretty rare. So that's what this is capturing.
Mr. Doran.
Thank you. I think you proactively, I was wondering what the previous wording was and how we have governed, and some of it is perhaps asking administration to give me a better update on where we are with non-custodial. I do have concerns in terms of they're saying that the way this is, that they may visit the student at school and may pick up the student after school. That becomes particularly problematic, that in many cases the non-custodial are not able to do that unless they have the parent permission. And whether or not it's in a legal agreement with them. But we have a lot of non-custodial parents who there are different circumstances, and this seems to really open wide. You basically, they have educational rights. They have educational rights, even if they're terminated, or unless they're specifically terminated, they have rights to have a parent-teacher conference, to access, get records and reports and things of that sort, but they don't in at least some non-custodial situations don't have the right to take a student out of school or necessarily visit him. So there are lots of points to me. So those are the particular ones. What constitutes regular communication? Also in this, um, you know, that can become problematic. A teacher is sending a note, "Hey, your kid did a great job today," um, or they might have a concern and something like this. Does that have to go to the non-custodial parent automatically? Um, and then, so let me stop there, and then I have another question that relates to non-custodial. Others may have comments first.
Yeah, I'll jump in to start with, and then Ms. Dillard can add on to it. I think you raise the exact point of why this policy is necessary for the district, that the district continues to face very complicated situations with families. And the default for the district is that both natural and adoptive parents have rights for their children until we receive court orders that say different. So that's the default for the district, and that's what the intent of this policy is getting at, is that letting parents know that unless the district has court orders or documentation that shows specific rights have been severed, then we fall into the default of working with all parents involved.
Ms. Julian.
So then I have a question about how that actually works. So as a parent, you you state, who necessarily can pick up the child or have access to records. But are the situations that we're faced with, does this policy, I'm with Mr. Doran that I feel like this policy almost opens up more complication by stating that adoptive and natural parents of any student may, visit the student at school, pick up the student after school. It feels like it goes beyond the educational rights that they have and into more of accessing and have access in a relationship with that student in school, unless the school district has, of course, evidence. But is it necessary to add that additional language in, or could this be cleaned up and really streamlined to just focus on the students' records, participation in student activities, things like that?
I think it's a great question, and I think it extends beyond that because it is beyond just educational records. And so unless the school knows that a parent can't do these activities, we're operating from the default that the parent does get to enjoy the same opportunities that any other parent would get to enjoy. And so, yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Ms. Maple.
I'd be curious if we could get some legal guidance on broadening the language around the court order, because right now in two places it's saying, that that's kind of the end all be all. But I know that I certainly have had custody issues where there's no court order saying that the biological parent isn't allowed to pick them up. However, there's OCS's regulations say that. So OCS has made a determination, but the courts haven't yet. All the courts did is remove the child from that custody, but often a child's removed from custody and there's still unsupervised visitation or the parent's allowed to visit at school. So I wouldn't want to make it so broad that it means that that administrators at a school are not able to just say, look, this is the documentation I have on file and I have to follow this. I certainly see the value in that. But also know that there's definitely times where there would be restrictions that are not reflected in a court order or pending legal action even. And maybe that's even just documentation from a state office. I don't know what that would look like, but
I've never seen anything that wasn't expressed as a court order, but that's certainly something that we could follow up on. We have an OCS liaison in the district. We could talk to them about what they think the language captures or doesn't capture regarding what would be a legal document that would fall under this policy. Mhm.
And I like your suggestion. I mean, maybe it's trying to broaden it to governmental agency or something that gets at exactly what that who has that authority. And I guess for the board's awareness, this isn't currently changing any practice that we're currently working through. We're just trying to clarify that when we're working with parents, that the board also has a policy on this that supports the practices we have in place, because we are facing this to more of a consistent degree than we have in the past. And they're pretty complicated situations. And so we continue to remind parents that unless we have some official documentation that severs relationship from a parent or guardian with a child, that parent or child, or that parent also enjoys, the rights, the educational rights and all the rights that come with being a parent to that child, unless we receive something that restricts that.
Mr. Doran.
Thank you. And I think the discussion is important because I think there are some adjustments or things we should look at in terms of, the first sentence is basically is accurate. I mean, I have no problem with that one. It's the second one is that they'll be respected even if legal custody and arguably any court order or other legal things that we sometimes have. Parents don't go through the court, but they will drop. I've seen it where they've actually drafted a legal document and both signed it and notarized it with a lawyer or whatever. But that even if is what I'm particularly concerned with. I think the first sentence is important because we have many parents who split for one reason or another, and they've come to a verbal agreement or they have a legal document and they just don't give it to us. Until we have that document, we don't know what the thing is. So I think that first sentence is important for all parents to be aware of. But I do have the concern with the even if. The other area of non-custodial parent, and I'm mindful as you were talking, you talk about complicated, it sounds like it's as complicated now as it was then. And I've had even competing court documents from two different states granting each parent full custody. And so that was a very interesting one to deal with. We worked it out. But we also have effectively a non-custodial parent, and I don't know that we can address this in policy, but if it can be, I want it on the table, where we have a non-birth parent who is the only parent for a child, and there is no paperwork. They are, okay, I'm thinking of several situations in which a couple had a child. There were also other children. The birth parent disappeared, and the parent that was there, not only for their birth child, but for their the other children in the family, was raising them and was the parent. Now, we dealt with that. We worked with it. But I'm cautious that as we set up something for non-custodial, that we put someone in jeopardy and for a child. And I actually think of right offhand two situations, though there are more, but at least two in which, well, I'm thinking three, up to four. Um, it was an excellent situation for the child. We were able to deal with it, but perhaps there's some issues legality-wise, and I just don't want somebody to get caught in that unnecessarily, you know. So I don't know how that fits in non-custodial because they have the custody, they just don't have the legal paperwork for it.
I'm not entirely sure. This was a first stab at having a policy. Our district doesn't currently have any policy, and we've been, working with legal counsel closely on, the challenging situations that come up. So sounds like we need to take this back and continue to potentially add more to it or refine it, and then bring it back to a work session for the board to consider in the future. Because I'm not sure that on the fly I have good suggestions of what could be added to it, but I think the conversation has been good in terms of different situations that we should be aware of that we could potentially incorporate into this policy to be as broad as possible to start with. And then, as we put it into place, if there's changes that need to be made down the road, then we can certainly bring that to the board to do that as well.
Follow up. Just want to say, I really like the intent of this because it would have been nice in my own experience to say, oh yes, this is, although it is predominantly reflective of what we would tell parents. If I don't have a paper, I have to treat both of you exactly alike. But if I've got a paper, then I have something to go by. So putting it in policy and clear, that part I really think is a good idea. I do have the one wording that I do think is problematic, that even if, but I think the intent, and I really appreciate your going after it to get it in.
Okay, we'll move to the next one. The next one is 50/30 school discipline and safety. So this is a beefy policy. It does have only slight cross references to our current policy 1055. We have 1055, which is student conflict resolution, and 720.2, which covers safety program, which covers a lot of different parts of the safety program, but does touch on school climate in that. This is a lot of information in this policy, but it really is everything from state statute on what a school district is required to do regarding school discipline and safety. And so with that, I will give it over to you.
Mr. Dorn.
Just a wording concern is when we talk about, we've referenced it as school discipline and safety program throughout. I'm concerned about program, unless we are clear that we're talking generically, that it's not using necessarily a specific program. There are lots of programs that are out there. We've had good experiences at different grade levels or school levels. You want to have a different program. You want to have, often in different schools, they will use one that fits, or they will have an initiative or such. So that, to me, this policy leads to a very prescriptive thing. You will do it this way, and potentially not. And if we say, well, what is this program you're using? It becomes, so that's my question.
It's the name of the statute, and so that is where the discipline and safety program language comes from. It's statute 1433, 120 through 140. So if you have a different word, I don't think it would hurt to consider that, but that's why it's pulled over.
Okay,
from the
that
statute.
helps to where that came from. I was,
Mhm.
so I would use something more like plan. Or I ran through my head of effort or some other words, but maybe plan is the better one that we have. We have a plan, and there may be programs used for that, but I think it gives that appropriate flexibility depending on our school levels and maybe even individual schools, rather than a specific program, especially as those programs change and sometimes they have requirements. If you're going to say you're using this, you have to be certified by us, and it may or may, you know, or there isn't a specific um, program or protocol, but you have a plan within. We might not have a name for it at a school, but we have a plan how we're addressing this, and I think that's very appropriate. So I'd suggest plan. Um, so
What about programming? Just to keep it kind of consistent with that statute language, it would sound like discipline and safety programming will prioritize accountability, fairness. Discipline and safety programming should reflect community standards of school behavior and safety.
Any other board members have suggestions here, or thoughts? I'll say I would be fine with a word change here. I do think that we need to acknowledge that if we do change that wording to plan, or it may, it's deviating a little bit from the state statute. I think we can probably address that though too. Or another thought that I had is that we could include a sentence here that says program is defined in the same way as it is in state statute for the purposes of this policy. Mr. Dorn.
is it defined in state statute? Just use the word. So, yeah. So if we add some clarity, I do have a problem if it's a standalone word there, and I think it's, but I don't know if it's defined.
Ms. Julian.
Okay, if I I'm gonna trust the administration on the wording. If it's in state statute, I support that. If we think that it needs to be changed, let's change it. The big question that I have though is this policy, it is beefy, and so thank you so much. I really appreciate this sentence here that the school board aims to provide all administrators, teachers, and other staff members with the support, authority, knowledge, and skills necessary to effectively implement the district's discipline and safety program. I like that one, and I like that sentence. I think it says that we understand that this is very difficult, and we are supporting our administrators in doing this very difficult work. From a practice perspective, does this policy reflect the practices and the statutes that are already kind of being done at our schools, or does this change anything about how we? Okay,
It doesn't change anything. It reinforces what the district
Okay.
does.
then I'm supportive of exactly how it's worded. Thank you.
And board members, any discussion? I'd like to make sure that the administration has clear direction here. Mr. Dorn? Did I see a hand there?
No more on that point.
Okay.
So if you wanted specifically, I have two other comments.
Anything further from the board? Administration, do you feel you have what you need to move forward with this policy?
I mean, I think the big conversation is between that program and plan. I think I'm okay with either one. Program certainly matches closely with state statute. So I'm hearing from one board member that he's supportive of a change. And we heard from Ms. Julian that she's supportive of keeping it program. So we probably would need to hear from more board members for direction on that change itself.
Ms. Carol Hubbard.
I'm in support of just leaving it as is. I trust that it's written the way it should be. And I think program and plan are very similar, so I'm fine with it as is.
Ms. Hull,
I'm also in support of leaving it as is.
Ms. Hewitt.
Yeah, I just was going to read the first line of the statute says each governing body shall adopt a written school disciplinary and safety program. So I think the word program fits what we choose to adapt, or I think if I understand Mr. Doran correctly, you're attempting to say you want it to be left in the school, individual schools of having their own plans, district-wide plan.
Chair, may I respond?
Mr. Doran.
Okay. Yes, I believe in empowerment, but the reality is that, and the practice of the district has been to provide different avenues of how and different approaches, depending on the school level, depending on the school community and such. And the district has actually done really well over the years, including the Safe and Civil Schools presentation that we had and the training that's going on currently, that it gives latitude to schools to do what's appropriate for their kids. It does, and it's also exposed staff members to a variety of programs, if you wish, but allowing them to take the best to make sure it's effective for students here in Fairbanks and students in their schools, and recognizing the different grade levels of schools, spans of schools. So it is not defined in statute, but, and thank you for bringing that up, but I am a believer in saying that schools implement things in the ways that make sense. And the example that I'll give specifically to that is that a school may adopt an approach. I'm thinking positive behavioral, PBIS. I forget what the IS stands for now. And then if the district picks another program the next year, but they maybe have been working for a couple of years and they're seeing benefit and payback from that, do they have to change that? So that's why I'm concerned in terms of saying that it is a program, because we should be open to a variety of approaches, and staff get invested in something, and then you're told, oh no, you can't do this. But students have, CHAMPS that we've been doing, which is part of the Safe and Civil Schools. A lot of schools adopted that quite clearly. Others took things out of it and added and enriched what they were doing in terms of school discipline, student discipline, and safety. So.
Any further discussion from the board?
Okay.
In general, or on that particular point?
On that particular point, but if you have something else on this policy, please proceed.
Moving on. So, I have somewhat of a similar thing, although not as strong, when we talk in the top of page 4, resolution strategy, and then it goes to the strategy will provide. It's not as generically, it is a broader term than the previous one that I have a concern about. But it's one that I would just toss out as maybe consideration from administration if there's something different. The other piece that in terms of not necessarily a bad thing, but third, second full paragraph on that page for at least once every 3 years. the district's discipline and safety program were reviewed and revised. Not necessarily a bad practice. My experience over decades has been that we've actually done this every generally 5 to 7 years, somewheres in there. So I find it interesting with 3. We certainly have not done it that frequently, but and what that how that means. But we've done some deep dives basically in my career in the district about every 5 to 7 years. It's come back and we've done surveys and we've done looking at policies and handbooks and things of that sort. It has been several years pre-COVID, I think, since we last did a real deep dive, but we're about that 7-8 year mark. It'll come up. It's coming up. So I'm just concerned about the practicality of 3 years. It should be reviewed periodically. But I'm just thinking of the onus, knowing what goes into that, the onus on administration to do it every 3 years.
So that is also the statute language, and it does align with our Administrative Regulation 9311, which is our policy review cycle, where every 3 years, each article will be reviewed. And I think that's more of a systematic concept and approach too, but I would say that, at least in my experience, the discipline policy is constantly being discussed, and feedback provided by principals to look at changes to administrative regulation where a lot of that lives.
Okay. Yeah, if it's in statute, that explains why it is there. Then I'm not sure exactly the date of the statute, but whether we were just ignoring it in the past. But however, what you do say is it's kind of an ongoing thing. But when we say it will be done every 3 years, then how we do it is formalized or expressed. So thank you.
Yeah, I think you were getting at it in your comments there, where I don't necessarily think it's pointing to that the board has to readopt or reaffirm the safety program, but that, through administration and our administrative regulations that guide a lot of the disciplinary procedures, that we'll be actively working through that as a district.
Mhm. Okay, I'm comfortable with it if you're comfortable with handling that
Yep, for sure.
administratively.
Okay, I want to just chime in here and, just I'm going to make a comment that maybe might seem out of place, but this is I'm just wondering really if this line of thought belongs here under this is school discipline and safety, and I think in here there's a requirement for an annual report to DEED and so forth. Which would suggest that there's some data collection that needs to happen. And I've just been thinking about the types of data that we collect on safety in particular. I know in this policy, we're looking at discipline tied to safety, but would this be an appropriate place, or even in the AR that's linked to this, to talk about collection of data on mental health? And behavioral issues. I've been hearing from school counselors that they would like more direction on how and when to collect and report on mental health issues in our schools.
Possibly. I think we need to go back and think about if this is the appropriate policy to attach that to, or if it's another one. We've definitely heard that request from you, President Burgess, and so we are actively looking at where that could fit and strengthening the direction we give to counselors and making sure that we're starting to consistently gather that data across the district.
Those data, thank you.
Thank you for that correction. Here we go.
Apologies, Dr. Miner. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I will likely continue to bring it up, but it's not I'm not bringing it up to harass y'all, just to keep it fresh in the mind. Okay, anything further from the board on this policy? Is the administration we ready to? Okay, we're gonna take a 1 minute at ease. Okay, and we're back. Thank you, board. Anything else on board policy 5030, school discipline and safety?
Okay, we will jump into the second very robust policy. This is 5040, student nutrition and physical activity. The reason why this policy has so much information in it is because it is a federal requirement that we have a school or student wellness policy that speaks to very specific things because we get federal federal child nutrition funding. So that's regulated by the USDA. We had about 4 policies that did capture a lot of this, 1061 through 1061.4. The AASB draft policy has even more in it, but I tried not to be too redundant because we do have food-related content in Article 3 that goes into like what you can have, what kind of foods you can sell at school and after school hours and during school hours and all of that. I tried not to repeat that too much here and just cross-reference it. There are these requirements that you'll see in this policy about doing a triennial assessment and regularly getting stakeholder feedback on this policy. So we have implemented that process by bringing this to policy committee last spring. And then we also did complete a triennial assessment. So what that means is we look at all of our policy and we look at what the federal government requires and or recommends be in the policy. And so we did that assessment, and that is published. I'm not sure where it's published, but in working with Amy Rouse with Nutrition Services, I believe they were going to put it on their website. And then we plan on, because this is an annual review, we plan on just embedding this in the policy committee process. We'll bring it to policy committee every spring so that we're following those regulatory requirements.
Ms. Julian.
Okay, I think I'm going to jump in here at first and just maybe head some questions off at the pass. Can I just assume that if there's anything that's related to a cadence of review or reporting or any specific language, that what you did is tried to mirror federal policy and state statute in your language choices in this policy?
That is correct. It's all federal regulations.
Okay, then I have no changes I'd like to make.
Ms. Carol Hubbard?
So I have a question, I think. Under C, under physical activity on page 8, there's a bullet point that says withholding physical activity or physical education time as a means of discipline during the day will be minimized. So are we talking about the like no recess? Like classes, recess is canceled?
That is what it's speaking to, and thank you for that question, because the review of this policy brought up our current practices regarding recess restriction as a punishment. And so we looked at best practices in AASB model policy. AASB did say that it will never happen. Recess will never be restricted as a disciplinary measure. However, with a lot of feedback from principals and understanding the resources in the district, We did create a new administrative regulation that defined what minimized means. And that is a current administrative regulation that we updated last spring. So it is, should be rarely used. There's lots of very specific parameters so that it's very rarely used. It's only the building administrator who is implementing it as a disciplinary measure. So that language can be found in the administrative regulation.
Follow up?
Follow up, Ms. Carol Hubbard?
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. So if a teacher is having an unruly day in the classroom, the teacher is not allowed to say, everybody stays in for recess. Is that true, sort of?
That
Did I
is-
understand you correctly?
That is true.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Dorn?
I do want to speak that I do like the idea of minimized, and I very strongly believe, I think a great example is before I became principal at school in town here, they did recess detentions, and we did away with that, and I did Friday detentions, and which greatly reduced detentions. But it was, and they were after school. But it did give me the latitude so that if a parent definitely could not do that, we either switch days, or in parent case, I had the latitude to say, okay, they owe me an hour on Friday, but we can do that in 2 half hours during the week because parent schedule needed to be able to pick them up right after dismissal. So I like the minimization and the idea that, yeah, basically we don't use recess as a time to punishment. And also a lot of kids, some kids like to be inside. So, but I like the direction we've gone to absolutely minimize it and basically discourage it used otherwise. In this policy, I do have a concern, although you addressed the length, and there's 4 policies in one, but some of my questions are in paragraph 2, and again, it comes up in the first paragraph on the next page. It talks about, in paragraph 2, it says, prevent and reduce childhood obesity. And I would suggest that we delete that phrase and stay with it to promote student wellness. And the reason is thinking has changed and approaches to obesity has changed. What is obesity? What is the, we're making a determination, what is obesity, which is medically has shifted significantly. And we also had some information shared with us and is gaining across our state, especially, but across the nation, the concern for students being over concerned about being too heavy and having the opposite issue. And how do we address that? So if we talk about wellness, that's there. Obesity is a specific thing that is more a medical, in the medical realm, and I think we should stay away from that. So I would delete that in the second paragraph, and then on the first paragraph of page 8, I would say promoting student health and delete and reducing childhood obesity.
I don't see that that would be a conflict to anything that we're trying to follow here, so.
Want me to keep going, or?
We have someone else in the queue, so Ms. Maple.
I support what Mr. Dorn just put forward as well. I just wanted to speak to the conversation that Ms. Carol Hubbard brought up about the not minimizing the use of recess as a punishment. or lack thereof. And just wanted to share that that was something that we had a really robust conversation about in policy committee. And that was, one of the things AASB is saying that we'll never, like, one of the things that came up was if there's an issue that is a recurring issue at recess, then perhaps that is an appropriate, just the few times where this might be appropriate, and why that extreme language of will never could really impede a building administrator's ability to do their job or keep a school or a building safe. But I love that it's reflected in other places, that change in practice is reflected in many parts of our policy, that we are recognizing it's rarely the most effective method. So just wanted to share that we discussed that a lot at the committee level.
Ms. Hewitt.
Are we changing gears? I mean, I do support also that language change, but it says in here that we utilize and incorporate local and Alaskan food products to the extent practicable. Do we know what that extent is right now? No, okay.
We had that question from a board member. I can't remember when it came up before, and we had a good answer from Ms. Rouse. Pretty much in summary, it was to the extent absolute possible, we're open to everything we can do to utilize local resources. Yeah, but I don't have an exact information about what that looks like or how often it's happening.
And I'll just speak to it because I have some personal, not direct experience, but I have heard from farmers, because I know some, that there are some logistical and financial challenges, as well as potentially some state statutes that might need to be addressed to get to where they really want to be in terms of providing schools with local produce. So I think it's something that's being tackled from many angles right now, but I think, to the extent that we can facilitate, I think that this policy helps us to do that. Ms. Hull.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Ms. Maple and the policy committee for looking at this policy and making sure that research is safeguarded for our kids.
Mr. Doran.
I'm going to take the opportunity to brag on Mrs. Rouse in terms of she's been with us a long time. And I am well aware that she has, from her earliest days with us, really has tried to look at how we can, she can bring in, fresh fruits and vegetables, how she can do local within the limits of federal and state guidelines. So she's been very proactive with that. We can't put a finger on it, and sometimes I know she wanted to do something and just couldn't figure out how to use the regulations quite the way we would like, but advocating for that. So I think that speaks very highly of her. I would like to suggest that on page 8, the second paragraph, schools will provide free drinking water in areas where meals are served and throughout the school buildings. I know because we sell bottled water in some of the vending machines, but there is free water in every single building and throughout the building. So I think it's an unnecessary and would bring this make a little bit smaller. But I would suggest we take it out. It's not applicable within our districts. I think in some of the, I was thinking, yes, there are some districts this might apply, and it might apply to, where we have a school that we were transporting water to for drinking purposes. We still have it free and available for them throughout the building. So reminds me of Wall Drug, who would advertise free water as you drove across the Midwest.
I 100% agree with you, Mr. Dorn. I added that back in from one of our initial edits because we got dinged out on our last audit for not having it in policy. So,
Okay, I consider my hand slapped. I will take that audit critique. Jeez, all right. Okay. Okay. I have two other quick things on here. One is the point A, maintain a wellness advisory group. I don't know that do we have one, or do we have to create one? I was suggesting that this might be a great one to just be part of the parent engagement committee, or family engagement committee, as we now call it, which also acts as an advisory group for Title I family engagement, but rather than have another group and all stakeholders are represented, et cetera. But the practicality of that.
and I think that the goal was to just capture it with the policy committee because there's work. I mean, it's a fit for us right now with me working on policy and being with the policy committee. That is a stakeholder group, and there's internal feedback that we gather in order to bring that to the policy committee. So that's what we've looked at doing, using the policy committee for that function.
Go ahead, Mr. Dorn.
Okay, the last one in this area is at the top of page 8, all foods. What my concern is, and I know boards prior to this have had extensive discussion in terms of the fundraisers. We've gone away from that during the day. As far as selling foods, we've gone away from, conscious of what other things are served during the day by the school or made available within the school itself by the school. But the question of parents who bring in a treat for their kid's birthday or things of that sort, that we've had latitude in terms of that connection. I want to make sure that this does not keep us from that. Because that's parent engagement, and not every parent has the time or the wherewithal to meet all the nutritional types of things. But we don't want to turn parents away who are trying to do something for their kid and their kid's friend, class, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that we have the latitude elsewhere that recognizes that we want parents to be part of this.
We do. That is something, if you look at all of the federal regulation guidance, there's a section of what you have to have in the policy and what is suggested in the policy. And there's quite a bit of suggested language that we have purposely not brought over. One of that being not to allow food that doesn't meet the smart snacks requirements for class parties and stuff like that. So there are certain there's even some language about what teachers should be eating in front of the students that we haven't brought over. So we've followed what we are required to do, but as far as additional things that are suggestions or recommendations from federal regulations, you won't see here, and that was one of them.
Great, okay. I just wanted to get that confirmation. So great, thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions or comments from the board. So looks like we're ready to move on.
Okay, our next policy is 5111.2, part-time enrollment. This walks over to our 1222 shared services and policy 1026 part-time students. What's that? No. Yeah, so with that, no procedural changes to how we do things with this policy. So I'll give it over to you for questions.
Mr. Dorn.
Very quick numbering question.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have 5111.1? Why is it 2?
Unfortunately, we don't, but we do have a 5111 that we're still working on, and it's admissions policy. So we're not looking at that today, but there is not a 511.1.
Is there any reason why it should be a 2 instead of a 1?
We were just following the ASB model policies numbering.
And that is pretty common as you look across districts that adopt a ASB, that they might skip a policy number,
Okay.
but that they try to keep it consistent with the way that AASB has it numbered.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from the board on this policy? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next.
Okay, the next policy is 5112.1. It's exemptions from attendance. This is a new policy to our district. It is very much highlighting statutory exemptions from attendance. And just because I assume there will be a lot of questions about what those might entail, I just printed out what is the administrative regulation from AASB. Exemptions from attendance per statute. I mean, there's like 12 listed in the law. It could be anywhere from attend a school operated by the federal government, are in the custody of a court or law enforcement authorities, are temporarily ill or injured, have completed the 12th grade. So there's a whole list of potential reasons why a student might be excluded from compulsory attendance.
And would those be outlined in AR or just by reference to statute?
We'll make sure that we look at the AR and then pull that over, but that was the model AR from ASB.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dorn?
Generally speaking, I don't have a problem with it, except better information in terms of we're responsible for enforcing the compulsory attendance, but we have no enforcement powers to do so. And unless things have dramatically changed, the courts do not necessarily back that up. So I'm concerned about our saying we are responsible, but yet we can't do it. So we can inform people, 7 to 16, within the exemptions, but I'm just concerned about the wording that we're saying we have the responsibility for it, but we can't exercise that reason.
Yes, and I think you're right. There are a lot of measures that the district takes, though, to ensure that we're doing what we can for compulsory laws, like there's state reporting requirements after so many unexcused absences. There's a requirement in statute that we have some sort of chronic absenteeism intervention policy or practices. I don't remember the exact term for that. So I think we do what we can, but I understand what you're saying.
Would there be, would it be reasonable to change that wording, or is that following state statute? Or go ahead, Mr. Dorn.
I'm just thinking, what if we said we're supporting rather than enforcing? Because we are doing a lot to try and support and to draw the compulsory attendance law information to parents attention when that's appropriate, et cetera. So, no. And I'm not wedded to the word supporting. I'm just thinking we can enforce. We have no powers to enforce it.
Yeah. I would support that word change. I was thinking following myself might be simple enough as well, or you could do both, following and supporting state compulsory attendance laws.
I can look at that wording and just look back at the statute and make sure that we're not concerned about any contradictions.
Great, thank you. Anything else from the board on this one? Okay, it's 8:18, so we have 12 minutes. So let's see how far we can get.
Okay, the next one is similar to what we just did. Exemptions from attendance, 5112.1. This one speaks to statute on grounds for suspension or denial of admission. So we have suspension, expulsion policy, and procedures and practices that we know very well. But there is also the ability to essentially expel a student who is, let me find the right one. Here's some examples. Resides in an area subject to quarantine, is exempt from a medical examination, but is believed to suffer from a contagious infectious disease, is determined to be a clear and present danger to the life, safety, or health of students or school personnel. And the statute that speaks to expulsions also has that information in it, that if a student presented as being a safety risk at school, they could essentially be barred from attendance by the district. That's not something in the conversation about what that might look like. It's not something the district has ever done in anybody's memory. So what that would look like if it was not tied to an actual disciplinary response, like it hasn't happened, but there is law that supports that. And the administrative regulation that goes along with this policy has an example of a board process for what that might look like, and then just, what the law supports in that regard.
Mr. Dorn?
And maybe just suggesting that the administration go and look at some possible alternate wording. When my eye was caught by the physical or mental condition. We have students in our schools who have physical conditions or mental conditions that we're able to deal with. But I think these are specifically more medical or behavioral that get in the way of their being there and making danger to and it's not, and when I look at unable to reasonably benefit, I've heard conversations regarding students' special needs being, well, they're not going to, what's their reasonable benefit? Sometimes just the fact that they can be there and be among others, peers, and et cetera, is beneficial. But I understand the exclusion, and we do. When a student's it's really behaviorally based, that is just beyond and disruptive to the learning environment. So I would suggest that maybe if administration, through the chair, administration could maybe take a look at this. I think the wording physical and mental is a little problematic to the reader.
So that is straight from the same statute. So it's a physical or mental condition that is, in the opinion of a competent medical authority, will render the child unable to reasonably benefit from the program. So that I didn't say that one before, so I apologize, but that is in that policy. But again, or that statute, again, it was something that when we discussed it, it's like it's never happened. Nobody had any idea of that ever happening in recent history. So, but it is in the law. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My concern is addressed. It's in statute. That's their problem.
Okay, anything else on 5112.2? Seeing none, let's move on to the next.
Okay, you guys, this is a fun one.
Yay.
Open, closed campus. It's fun because we never had this policy before. we had the practice, but not the policy. So we, again, no match, brand new to us. We looked at it with principals. And any questions or comments?
Oh, this is
Miss Hewitt.
okay.
I flagged the disciplinary action just as, and I think I meant to put in there, I lost it now. You took it away from me. Corrective action instead of disciplinary action as a potential change.
Um, My only thought on that is that we're not going to see it today, but feeding into a lot of our discipline policy revisions that are happening, we have chosen some language around different kinds of interventions with students, and we've defined them as restorative, learning, and corrective interventions. So that word is going to have a lot of very specific meaning in future policy and administrative regulation language. Appropriate action?
Meant less negative, yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Miss Julian.
Okay. I'm just, you all know what I'm going to ask here, which is how long do students have? I'm in favor of a closed campus. I said it at high school. And I'm totally unpopular, right? Totally unpopular. Why do we have open campuses at lunch for high school, and what exactly are they doing at lunch? Backstory. I'm gonna set the stage here because I'm not the only board member who likes to set the stage. So I'm gonna set the stage. When I was in high school,
Quick note, we do have 5 minutes before we're adjourning.
oh my gosh, thank you, and I will keep it concise. When I was in high school, first 2 years of high school, freshman, sophomore year, open high school campus, open lunch. And then my junior and senior year, closed campus. And since then, it has been closed campus. This is in the city of South Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm just so curious. Is it because it would cause more work because we don't have enough space in our schools and educators to monitor all the students on campus at lunch, and it helps relieve our educators' workload? And I'm not opposed to that if that's the answer, but I'm just curious.
I'll start and then I'll hand it over to Ms. Gillum. Yes, I think that is definitely part of it. I think when our lunchrooms were built, they weren't built for the size of the student body populations that we have. And so then you start running into having to run multiple different lunches, which also messes with, the master schedule. And it's also just been kind of a cultural norm, I guess, of our high schools here in Fairbanks. So.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments that when we did have a closed campus, like coming out of the pandemic, we did have to run multiple lunches. I mean, there were lots of other variables within that. It certainly has been a past practice. I guess this is also perhaps my personal opinion. I also think that as high schools, we're training students to take on more and more responsibilities and to be responsible citizens and adults ready to go out into the world. So managing that time, managing the responsibility of having the privilege of having an open campus, I think is also could be a piece of it as well.
Miss Maple.
I just as a comment, I think there also is a level of like learning some hard lessons by having an open campus, that like there are mistakes that are going to be made that but that's how we learn how to be responsible citizens often. And I'd rather those mistakes get made. We talk about this at the Children's Museum World, that like I want people to push boundaries when they're young to learn good boundaries, not when they can get behind the wheel of a car intoxicated. So I want a kid to learn a boundary in high school instead of having a catastrophic boundary in college. And at my high school, we were down in a downtown area and had an open campus. And when we did get that revoked, it was called grounding. And I don't know if that's a word that we use at our schools, and I'm curious. What do they call it if you lose your open campus permissions?
Nothing that creative. I think we just called them restricted or something to that.
Well, there's an
effect, yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Mr. Dorn.
First, I want to note that I had no questions on this policy, but I did want to just address the open campus. And I believe it actually goes back to the pipeline. And we had East and West Lathrop. But to Ms. Gillum's point, I think is our administrators have really worked hard to make it a positive. And educational decisions were made as schools were subsequently built in terms of the square footage allocation, that if you had a cafeteria that could actually, the larger the cafeteria, the less space, square footage you had for classrooms and academic pursuit. So there is a combination of educational decision priorities in allocating space within the square footage allowed by the state and funded by the state, as well as just sheer total numbers of students in a school that exceeded that capacity to have them all there. So, but I really do want to second watching administrators try to make a very positive view of, we have this, there may be pros and cons, but trying to make it as much of a pro as possible.
Ms. Hull.
I'll be really brief. I just had a question because I see this in my sister. It says, unless they have brought written authorization from their parents' guardians. I'm wondering if maybe that could be worded differently, something about consent of parents, because I'm going to say that I probably wouldn't even think to write a letter in to the school. I'd probably just call in. I don't know if that's something.
I could speak to that. I think that written authorization can be as simple as a signature on a sign-out sheet, which I see when I visit schools. There's sign-out sheets at the front office. Ms. Hull.
Sorry, but with the sign-up sheet, that would require me having to go to the school, and sometimes parents don't want to have to go in to the school, and so I'm just wondering if maybe.
Okay, administration's got that note. And they'll look at it. Mr. Doran, and we're a minute over, so.
Okay, so just on that point, I assume that like students who have a free period, there are accommodations, or they may go to a work experience, but that's part of their school plan, so that doesn't necessarily need a written authorization.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And I do know that parents often, if they find, I didn't know my kid was leaving school. So I think having this in here is beneficial.
Okay. I think sounds like we're pretty much done with comments on this. If anyone disagrees with that, we'll start here next time. But I just wanted to remind you of, before we adjourn, of what happens next, right? So we're partway through Article 5. We're going to bring this back to another work session to continue. In the meantime, if you do have any changes, or if anything occurs to you for what we've already reviewed, please email those thoughts or questions to administration prior to the next work session. So that way we can deal with it in work session and hopefully not be wordsmithing once we get to first reading. All right, and with that, we are adjourned.